Cheating billionaire forces his pregnant wife to leave with nothing. She destroys him in minutes. They called him the Golden Tycoon, an untouchable billionaire who could bend the world to his will with just the flick of a pen. She was the elegant beauty who once captured his heart, standing beside him at star-studded galas, reveling in the glow of an extravagant life. But beneath the polished marble floors and glittering chandeliers lay an ugly truth. He was ruthless, manipulative, and hiding a secret affair. When she discovered she was pregnant, he did the unthinkable, forcing her out of their mansion without a dime to her name. Little did he know, her determination to seek justice would soon bring him to his knees. Alexander Harrington was the kind of man whose name rang across continents. Born into a world of privilege, he magnified it with his sharp intellect and unwavering ambition. By the age of 35, Alexander stood at the helm of Harrington Global Investments, a heavyweight contender on Wall Street with connections spanning from Zurich to Hong Kong. Reporters often referred to him as the Golden Tycoon, a moniker he wore as comfortably as his custom-tailored suits. His boardroom presence was undeniable. Every meeting was a battlefield where Alexander's brilliant strategies outmaneuvered seasoned financiers twice his age. Claire Dawson was the polar opposite in upbringing, yet her radiance and wit turned heads in any room she entered. Raised in a modest home in upstate New York, she learned early on the value of hard work and sincerity. Her parents had owned a small bed and breakfast near the peaceful lakes of the Adirondacks, instilling in her the virtue of genuine hospitality. Armed with an unwavering belief in love and loyalty, Claire moved to New York City in her 20s, determined to carve her own destiny. She had a passion for interior design, and soon her unique creative flair earned her a modest but loyal clientele. It was at a charity event for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital that their paths first collided. Claire had been invited by a client who appreciated her design expertise. Alexander was the keynote speaker, cutting a striking figure on stage with his confident gestures and resonant voice. His speech about philanthropic responsibility, a term he claimed all wealthy individuals should embrace, electrified the crowd. Even Bill Gates, who had donated to the cause that evening, nodded in approval from the front row. After the speech, Claire was captivated enough to linger near the stage. In a moment that felt almost scripted, Alexander spotted her. He made his way through the throng of sycophants, introduced himself with the kind of charm usually reserved for silver screen leading men, and asked her name. Claire, initially stunned by his direct approach, answered with poise. He found her modesty refreshing, so far removed from the usual arrogance and social climbing he often encountered. Their first official date was at Le Bernardin, one of the city's top Michelin star restaurants. The night buzzed with energy and possibility. They spoke for hours about her dreams of designing boutique hotels that were not only luxurious, but also deeply sustainable, and about his plans to transform Harrington Global Investments into a powerhouse that financed green tech ventures and community development programs. Claire, naive and hopeful, believed she had found a man whose ambitions aligned with her own moral compass. Within a year, their whirlwind romance led them to say, "I do" in a lavish ceremony at the Plaza Hotel. The guest list brimmed with luminaries, CEOs of multinational companies, senators, celebrities, and even a cameo by Leonardo DiCaprio. Everywhere, the hush of awe enveloped them. Claire, resplendent in a Vera Wang gown, felt like she was living a fairy tale. She never forgot the gentle tears that glistened in her father's eyes as he walked her down the aisle, nor the look of pride on her mother's face as she embraced the Harrington family for the obligatory wedding photos. But high society has its own rules and unspoken pacts. Before her wedding, Claire had signed a prenuptial agreement, a typical arrangement for someone of Alexander's stature. Or so she was told. Though it pricked her sense of romantic trust, Alexander charmed her with sweet promises of security. "The prenup is just a formality," he'd said. "You'll never have to worry about money. I want you to be happy, always." In the beginning, Claire was thrilled to host charity events, decorate their penthouse overlooking Central Park, and accompany Alexander to boardroom dinners. Their home was a testament to her artistic vision, floor-to-ceiling windows, plush earth-toned sofas, and walls adorned with abstract paintings from emerging artists she admired. Their gatherings were the talk of the town, featuring the right balance of opulence and warmth. Some nights, they'd lie awake in bed, discussing future family plans too, maybe 3 children, a second home by the Italian coast, a pledge to remain each other's best friend through every storm life might throw at them. But the cracks appeared gradually, like hairline fractures in fine china. A suspicious text on Alexander's phone here, a late-night business call there. Claire reasoned it away. He was a billionaire, after all, and what billionaire isn't busy? She tried to see the best in him, telling herself that it was her job to be supportive. Yet, the hush of night sometimes found her awake, her heart uneasy, listening to the hum of the city below. As the tension in her chest grew, she told herself it was paranoia, a leftover instinct from her simpler upbringing. Little did she know that beneath the polished smiles and sweet words, Alexander was orchestrating a life she never imagined possible, one where her love and loyalty would be trampled in a ruthless quest to protect his image and fortune. Still, in the early days, Claire cherished the illusions of a perfect marriage, trusting wholeheartedly that Alexander truly loved her. Those illusions were about to be shattered irrevocably. Almost 2 years into their marriage, Claire noticed she felt more fatigued than usual. She brushed it off as the demands of her design projects and the philanthropic functions she organized. Then came the bouts of morning nausea. One chilly January morning, she woke before dawn, feeling unusually queasy. Racing to the bathroom, she felt her stomach lurch, and by the time Alexander stirred from his side of the bed, her suspicions crystallized. She might be pregnant. Claire purchased a home pregnancy test in secret, not wanting to raise Alexander's hopes or concerns unnecessarily. And there it was. 2 pink lines confirming that their carefully laid plans for a family were becoming a reality sooner than expected. A swirl of excitement and anxiety consumed her. She recalled his words, "I can't wait to have kids with you. We'll show them the world." She decided to share the news that evening. That evening, however, Alexander returned unusually late. He had been traveling extensively, first to London for a high-stakes merger, then to Singapore for a technology conference. His once frequent calls and messages had dwindled, replaced by rushed texts that always ended with the same generic sentiment, "Love you, but busy. Talk soon." Claire had left him 6 voicemails over the last 2 days, all unanswered. By the time Alexander stepped into their penthouse, the clock neared midnight. Claire, fighting to stay awake, greeted him with a relieved smile. She tried to hide her disappointment at his tardiness as she brought him his favorite scotch on the rocks and gently massaged his shoulders. "Long day?" she ventured, hoping for some semblance of emotional intimacy. "Yes," he replied, curtly, draining the scotch in a single gulp. He loosened his tie and sank into a velvet armchair facing the window. The city sparkled below, but in Claire's chest, dread formed an icy knot. Something about his distant demeanor weighed heavily on her. "I have some news," she began softly, stepping closer to him. She rested a trembling hand on her abdomen, hoping he'd notice the significance. He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "You do? All right, let's hear it." No warmth, no curiosity, just terse indifference. she exhaled, willing herself not to cry. "I'm pregnant, Alexander. We're going to have a baby." A shy, hopeful smile spread across her face. For a fleeting moment, his expression softened, almost as if he might stand up and wrap her in the tightest embrace. But just as quickly, he masked it with a polished smile that failed to reach his eyes. "That's wonderful news," he said at last, though his voice lacked the enthusiasm she'd prayed for. Claire felt the blow of disappointment, but she tried to soothe herself with rationalizations. "He's tired. He's stressed about the new business deals. He needs time to process." The next day, she woke up determined to allow him space, thinking that a heartfelt celebration of this baby could come later. She immersed herself in researching prenatal vitamins and scheduling a doctor's appointment. Secretly, she browsed for baby clothes, tiny onesies that melted her heart. But as her pregnancy progressed, Alexander's behavior turned more erratic. He would vanish for days on alleged business trips, returning with only a perfunctory kiss on the forehead. When asked about the reasons behind his extended absences, he'd become evasive, even snapping at her on occasion. Calls went unreturned more often than not. The affectionate man she once knew had retreated behind a wall of secrecy that Claire couldn't breach. Then came the dinner at the Four Seasons. Alexander was hosting a small gathering for foreign investors, and he insisted that Claire join to maintain appearances. She found herself seated next to a well-known investment banker and longtime friend of Alexander's, Patrick Layton. Patrick was a jovial man with a slight British accent, rumoured to have cut deals with Morgan Stanley and JPM Morgan Chase that soared into the billions. Across the table, Alexander was engrossed in conversation with a stunning brunette named Bianca Rossi, an up-and-coming hedge fund manager from Italy. Claire felt a pang of jealousy shoot through her. The brunette's manicured hand lingered on Alexander's arm a bit too long whenever she laughed. Her body language radiated flirtation. At first, Claire doubted herself. Maybe this was just business banter. But the more she observed, the more the coil of insecurity tightened in her gut. Over the course of the evening, she witnessed hushed whispers between them, exchanged looks that held an intimacy far too personal for colleagues. Claire tried to remain poised, projecting the calm grace of a supportive wife. When dinner concluded, she hurried to Alexander's side and looped an arm through his. He stiffened at her touch. "I'm tired. I need to head home," Claire said softly, hoping he'd offer to escort her. Instead, he forced a polite smile and replied, "Go on without me. I need to finalize some details with Bianca." The car ride home was torturous. Claire's heart pounded with confusion and a growing sense of betrayal. She recalled every rumor she'd shrugged off in the past tales of Alexander's roving eye, his rumored dalliances with corporate assistants, the whispered scandals that always mysteriously disappeared from the tabloids. She had defended him time and again, trusting his explanations over gossip, but now the once steadfast faith in her husband faltered under the weight of mounting evidence. Over the next few weeks, Claire tried talking to him about her suspicions. Each time, he deflected with impatience or hostility. "Don't be ridiculous," he'd hiss, voice dripping with annoyance. "Bianca is just a contact for a European expansion. Stop inventing dramas in your head." With every passing day, Claire felt more alone, overshadowed by a presence she couldn't fully name or confirm. She prayed that what she witnessed was mere business chemistry, but deep inside, an ominous dread told her otherwise. In her 6th month of pregnancy, Claire woke up in the middle of the night to find Alexander gone. A half-packed suitcase in the hallway signaled an unannounced trip. She searched the penthouse for a note, a text, anything explaining his abrupt departure, but found nothing. The silence enveloped her like a suffocating shroud. She was left to stare at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, tears streaming down her face as she cradled the gentle swell of her belly. Night after night, She wrestled with the urge to demand answers, to confront him with the fury she felt she deserved to unleash. Yet she also yearned for the Alexander she'd married, the attentive man who once whispered sweet nothings in her ear. Still, his indifferent dismissal and the possibility of heartbreak paralyzed her. Little did she know, her worst nightmares were about to come true in the cruelest, most humiliating way. The illusion of a happily ever after was about to be shattered, and the real fight of her life, the fight not just for her marriage, but for her dignity, was about to commence. The message arrived on a Sunday morning, a day Claire had hoped they might spend choosing paint colors for the nursery. She found a printed letter propped on the marble kitchen island, sealed in a Harrington Global Investments envelope. Its contents would devastate her entire world in a single stroke. Dear Claire, it is with great consideration and regret that I have decided to file for divorce. Enclosed, you will find all relevant documentation, including a request that you vacate our shared residence within 7 days. Please be assured that I have your best interests at heart. However, according to the terms of our prenuptial agreement, you will not receive alimony or property rights. You may keep the personal items you brought into our marriage. Sincerely, Alexander Harrington. The lines felt cold, meticulously calculated by someone with no semblance of compassion. Claire read them 3 times, each iteration tightening a vise around her chest. She sank onto a bar stool, feeling her stomach churn. 7 days. She had 7 days to leave the only home she'd known for nearly 3 years, while 6 months pregnant with his child. She tried calling Alexander, but it went straight to voicemail. She texted him, pleading for an explanation, for a conversation, for anything, but got no response. It took everything in her not to collapse into hysterics. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to recall that she wasn't just fighting for herself, now she was fighting for the life inside her. Desperate for some clarity, she phoned Patrick Layton, the friend from the Four Seasons dinner. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he could talk sense into Alexander. Patrick answered in a subdued tone. "Claire, I'm sorry," he began. "I've heard rumors that Alexander is, well, he's serious about this. He's been seeing someone else and wants to finalize matters before the baby arrives." A painful silence followed. "Who, Bianca?" Claire asked, the name barely escaping her lips. Patrick sighed. "Yes, that's what I'm hearing. I can't confirm, but it's not the first time I've heard her name linked to his. I tried talking to him. He's convinced it's for the best. Something about not wanting any public scandal that might harm his standing if it gets messy. You know how he is about his public image." Claire's eyes burned with tears. The magnitude of the betrayal left her breathless. Was she really so disposable? She stared at the pristine kitchen counters and the glimmering chandelier above the domestic dream she'd believed in so fully. She tried to pull herself together, to think logically. Instead, she felt a raw ache so profound it almost paralyzed her. All day she wrestled with the despair, wandering the penthouse in a daze. Eventually, she realized that her heartbreak was overshadowed by a more pressing fear. If she were to leave with nothing, how would she provide for herself and her unborn child? She had some savings from her interior design work, but nowhere near enough to sustain her through a costly legal fight with Alexander Harrington. The prenuptial agreement was notoriously ironclad, or so everyone claimed. In her innocence, she had never even retained her own legal counsel before signing it. Still, a spark of defiance sparked inside her. She had spent years supporting Alexander, organizing philanthropic events that burnished his image, creating a nurturing environment at home, even stepping back from expanding her own career to focus on his. If he thought she would walk away quietly, he was gravely mistaken. She resolved that if he wanted to cast her aside, she would at least force him to face the consequences of his cruelty. Within 2 days, she packed her essentials into 2 suitcases. Tearfully, She walked through each room in the penthouse, memories flooding back, her laughter echoing in the living room during their first Christmas, the corner of the bedroom where she first told him she loved him, the nursery she'd barely begun planning. She fought a war within herself, heartbreak over losing the life she'd built, and steely determination to fight for what she believed she deserved. And so, late one night, she left. The doorman offered a sympathetic nod, loading her luggage into a cab. Claire clutched her phone and wallet, feeling the subtle weight of her unborn child inside her. As the taxi pulled away from the glittering tower, she felt a wave of panic. Where would she go? She ended up at a small hotel in Midtown, its modest lobby a far cry from the opulence she was used to. The manager, a kindly older man named James, recognized her from a charity gala she'd helped organize for local homeless shelters. "Miss Harrington?" he whispered, surprised to see her in jeans and a wrinkled coat, looking exhausted and teary-eyed. Claire forced a watery smile. "I just need a quiet place, James. Discreet, if that's possible." James nodded in understanding, and within minutes she had a comfortable, if humble, room. That night, Claire curled up on the bed, hugging a pillow and wishing it were Alexander's arms. But the memory of his callous letter hardened her resolve. She wasn't alone, she had the baby, and she owed it to that tiny life to be strong. Morning arrived, and she knew what she had to do: find a lawyer, someone formidable enough to challenge the power and wealth of Alexander Harrington. She spent hours scrolling through law firm websites on her phone. A name surfaced repeatedly: Rachel Morgan. Claire recalled reading about Rachel in a Forbes article titled "America's Top 10 Divorce Attorneys for the Elite." She was renowned for her ruthless cross-examinations and her ability to dismantle even the most airtight prenuptial agreements. She had represented celebrities, captains of industry, and even a European princess in a highly publicized settlement. If anyone could take on Alexander and his high-powered legal team, it was Rachel. Summoning all her courage, Claire dialed the number. A crisp female voice answered, "Morgan and Associates." "How may we help you?" "Hello," Claire said, voice trembling slightly. I need to speak with Miss Rachel Morgan about a divorce case. It's urgent." The assistant hesitated for a moment, likely accustomed to endless calls from potential clients who might not afford the firm's retainer. "Ma'am, we're quite booked. Do you have counsel who can speak to Miss Morgan's office for a referral?" Claire swallowed hard. "I don't. This is a high-profile situation. My name is Claire Harrington. Perhaps you've seen me in the news. My husband is Alexander Harrington." She paused, letting that sink in. Even if the name no longer brought her comfort, she knew the gravity it carried in legal circles. A longer pause followed. "Please hold," the assistant finally said, her tone shifting into professional urgency. Within minutes, Rachel Morgan herself picked up. Her voice was melodic, yet steeled with confidence. "Miss S. Harrington, the first understand you're in need of representation. I have an opening this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Can you make it to my office?" Relief cascaded over Claire. "Yes, absolutely. I'll be there." That day, Claire stepped into the sleek offices of Morgan and Associates with her shoulders squared, fighting off nerves. She noticed the hush of deference the staff offered Rachel whenever she appeared. The attorney was in her mid-40s, with an elegant bob haircut, a tailored navy pantsuit, and an air of unflinching authority. She extended her hand in greeting. "Claire, I've been following your story from the tabloids. Please come in." The next hour was a whirl of intense conversation, with Claire explaining the prenuptial agreement, the timing of Alexander's betrayal, and her pregnancy. Rachel's sharp eyes flashed with empathy and then a cunning determination. "Well, you've come to the right place," Rachel said, leaning back in her seat. The prenuptial agreement is formidable, but no agreement is entirely bulletproof. We'll need to gather evidence, challenge the conditions under which you signed, and highlight the moral turpitude of forcing a pregnant wife out on the street. Judges don't look kindly on a father who abandons his unborn child. Claire's heart soared with cautious hope. She told Rachel everything: the suspicious texts, the nights he didn't come home, Bianca's presence. She even recalled a detail that might prove crucial: Alexander's repeated promises that she would always be cared for, made verbally but never captured in writing. He told me the prenup was just a formality, that if anything happened, I'd be taken care of. Her eyes filled with tears. I believed him, Rachel nodded. We can argue undue influence or misrepresentation. This is going to be a fight, no question about it. Harrington's legal team is top-notch, but I've bested them before, and I can do it again. She paused, then offered a small, comforting smile. You're not in this alone, Claire. We'll hold him accountable for every single tear he's made you shed. In that moment, a sense of gratitude washed over Claire. She realized that, for the first time in weeks, she felt something resembling hope. Yes, Alexander had cast her aside. Yes, he wielded enormous power, but she was not powerless. She had her will to fight, and now she had Rachel Morgan. That night, alone in her hotel room, Claire pressed her hands gently to her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay." She believed it, or at least wanted to believe it, because the real battle was just beginning, and Alexander Harrington was about to learn that the woman he had underestimated had far more strength than he ever gave her credit for. The following week, Claire found herself thrust into a whirlwind of legal preparations. Rachel Morgan wasted no time assembling a strategic team. Paralegals rummaged through business records, bank statements, and every public document that could hint at Alexander's missteps. Private investigators were dispatched to gather details about Bianca Rossi and any other women rumored to have been in Alexander's orbit. What surprised Claire most was the groundswell of quiet support she received from unexpected corners. A few individuals from Alexander's social circle reached out privately, sharing stories of his increasingly ruthless conduct. One of the most significant revelations came from a former executive assistant at Harrington Global, who confided that he had personally scheduled suspicious late-night business meetings for Alexander at upscale hotels. "If you need me to testify, I will," the assistant whispered over the phone. "I left the company because I couldn't stomach the lies anymore." Claire's best friend from college, Emily Porter, also stepped in. Emily lived in a small townhouse in Brooklyn and insisted that Claire move in temporarily, free of charge. "I can't let you waste your money on a hotel," Emily declared. "It's you and me against the world. And, I'll help with anything: grocery runs, moral support, you name it." Claire gratefully accepted, moved by the generosity. Despite everything, the sorrow of losing her home weighed on her like an anchor. Being surrounded by a friend's warmth offered a fragile lifeline. Rachel, meanwhile, discovered a potent angle. Alexander's relationship with Bianca Rossi began months before the letter forcing Claire out. Through phone records and eyewitness accounts, they pieced together a timeline that suggested not only an affair, but also Alexander's attempt to push Claire away to avoid any complications. "He's orchestrated this to ensure a clean break," Rachel explained, "and that can significantly weaken the prenuptial agreement's enforceability. It undermines the notion of mutual good faith." Claire felt a spark of triumph. Even so, she was plagued by fears late at night of Alexander retaliating, or the heartbreak of confronting his betrayal face to face in court. She was not naive. She understood that a man as powerful as Alexander could play dirty. The potential for media scrutiny was immense, and she worried about the toll it might take on her unborn child. The tension escalated when a courier delivered a legal summons to Emily's townhouse. Reading through the official documents, Claire's stomach turned as she saw the signatories from Greenberg and Flanagan, one of the fiercest law firms in Manhattan. They represented corporate tycoons, famous political figures, and sometimes even foreign dictators. They had also been on the winning side of some messy divorces that left the other spouse with next to nothing. Alexander had spared no expense in hiring the best, clearly setting the stage for a grueling battle. "I expected this," Rachel said calmly when Claire forwarded the documents. "Don't let it scare you. We have what we need to fight back." What followed was a series of pre-trial meetings, depositions, and strategy sessions. Rachel coached Claire meticulously. "They'll try to discredit you," she warned. "They might argue that you married him for his money or that you signed the prenup with full knowledge. They could even question the paternity of the baby. We have to be ready for anything." Hearing that last possibility sent Claire's anger flaring. "That's absurd," she said, tears brimming. "Alexander knows the baby is his." Rachel's expression hardened. "They'll still use it if they think it'll weaken your case. That's the level of tactics we're dealing with. But we won't let them get away with it." Claire clenched her fists. "I refuse to let him win. Not after what he's done." One evening, after a long day of strategy meetings, Claire was in bed, perusing an old photo album on her phone. Pictures of her and Alexander smiling at a beach in the Hamptons, laughing in front of the Eiffel Tower, waltzing during their wedding reception under crystal chandeliers. Each photograph felt like a ghost haunting her heart. She had truly loved him, believed in him. How could that same man force her into this nightmare? As tears threatened to fall, Emily entered with a tub of Ben and Jerry's ice cream and 2 spoons. "You look like you need this," she said softly, climbing onto the bed next to Claire. They ate in comfortable silence at first, the sweet coldness of the ice cream countering Claire's swirling emotions. "It's unbelievable," Claire murmured eventually. "2 years ago, I was sure I'd spend the rest of my life with him. Now, all I feel is anger, sadness, and a burning drive to protect my baby." Emily gave her a gentle squeeze. "You're doing the right thing, Claire. Don't let him gaslight you into thinking otherwise." It was a small moment of solace in a sea of turmoil. Claire clung to it tightly. The next day, a call from one of Rachel's private investigators brought a significant breakthrough. They had tracked down a security guard from a boutique hotel in Los Angeles, where Alexander allegedly spent time with Bianca. The guard was willing to confirm that Alexander's visits coincided with reservations under a pseudonym for a Miss Rossi. In exchange for anonymity and some legal protections, he would testify to the affair in court. More evidence trickled in, receipts for lavish gifts purchased in Milan that were never delivered to Claire, credit card statements for romantic dinners in Paris. On nights Alexander claimed to be on business trips alone. Rachel wasted no time weaving this evidence into a compelling narrative. "This shows a pattern," she explained at the next strategy meeting. "He not only broke marital vows, but also schemed to evade legal responsibility. We can argue that he deliberately orchestrated the prenuptial terms to place you in a financially vulnerable position and used marital assets on his affair." Claire felt a righteous indignation stir in her. In a different life, she would have considered airing their dirty laundry publicly to be unspeakably shameful. But Alexander had drawn first blood, and now she had every right to fight back. It wasn't about revenge, though she couldn't deny the satisfaction in exposing his hypocrisy. It was about justice and ensuring that her child's future wouldn't be ruined by a father who treated them like an inconvenience. Amid the legal chaos, Claire attended her prenatal checkups. The stress weighed on her body, and her OB-GYN warned her to rest. "This level of anxiety isn't healthy for the baby," Dr. Miller cautioned. "Try to find some moments of peace if you can." Following her doctor's advice, Claire devoted an hour each morning to quiet meditation, focusing on her growing baby. She shut out thoughts of court battles and depositions, inhaling serenity and exhaling dread. Some days were easier than others. The small fluttering kicks in her abdomen reminded her that she was fighting for more than money. She was fighting for a life, a chance at a stable future for her child. Meanwhile, rumors swirled in high society circles. The tabloids caught wind of Alexander's pending divorce from his pregnant wife and his apparent involvement with Bianca Rossi. Magazine covers splashed with headlines like Golden Tycoon's Golden Mistress and Harrington Baby in the crossfire. Gossip talk shows analyzed the situation with invasive speculation, sometimes painting Claire as a naive gold digger, sometimes casting her as a tragic heroine. The media frenzy only fueled Rachel's resolve. Public opinion, she knew, could influence judges in high-profile cases. Alexander tried to manipulate the narrative. A statement from Harrington Global's public relations department labeled the divorce a personal matter and insinuated that Claire and Alexander had amicably chosen to part ways due to irreconcilable differences. The statement offered no apology for his affair, no acknowledgement of Claire's pregnancy beyond a vague reference. The gall of it incensed Rachel. "He's desperate to control the storyline," she sneered. "But the truth will come out." At one point, Claire received an unexpected call from Alexander's mother, Victoria Harrington. They had never been particularly close. Victoria had always been civil, but maintained an aloof distance. "Claire," she said in a measured tone, "I heard about what's happening. I'm sorry. I know Alexander can be difficult." There was a weary resignation in Victoria's voice, as though she knew all too well how her son operated. "I can't interfere," she added, "but I hope you find peace." Claire felt a moment of sorrow. Peace? That was a distant dream right now. She thanked Victoria and hung up, feeling more certain than ever that she was on her own, save for her lawyer and a handful of allies. Even Alexander's family acknowledged the futility of attempting to reason with him. As the trial date approached, both sides filed motions and counter-motions. Court appearances loomed. The tension was palpable. Yet, through it all, Rachel assured Claire that they had a strong case. The evidence of Alexander's affair, his underhanded dealings, and the moral reprehensibility of discarding a pregnant wife formed a powerful trifecta. If a judge saw it the way they hoped, it could nullify certain provisions of the prenup, awarding Claire a substantial settlement and child support. For Claire, victory was never about the money alone. It was about preserving her dignity, ensuring her child's well-being, and proving that Alexander's betrayal wouldn't break her spirit. And so, even though her nights were sleepless and her heart felt heavy, Claire forged ahead, determined to see justice served. Little did she know, the actual court battle would reveal more secrets and push both parties to the brink of desperation. The day of the first court hearing arrived with an overcast sky, as though the heavens themselves braced for the storm about to unfold. Claire stood outside the imposing marble steps of the New York County Supreme Court, her pulse thundering in her ears. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. She felt a wave of disorientation. This was a far cry from her quiet life in upstate New York, and certainly not the kind of public spectacle she'd ever wanted. Rachel guided her swiftly through the throng, deflecting questions with a practiced, "No comment at this time." Inside, the corridors buzzed with legal professionals in sharp suits. Claire clutched a folder containing documents Rachel had instructed her to keep close. They entered a high-ceilinged courtroom. Alexander was already seated at the defendant's table, flanked by 3 lawyers from Greenberg and Flanagan. He looked every bit the unruffled Titan, impeccably groomed hair, an expensive navy suit, and a face devoid of remorse. Next to him, Bianca Rossi sat in the gallery, her gaze steady and self-assured. The sight ignited a tempest in Claire's stomach. Bianca's presence was like a brazen declaration: we're together, and you can't do anything about it. The proceedings began with a crisp bang of the gavel. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Martinez, presided with an air of seasoned authority. She called for opening statements. Rachel rose, exuding calm confidence. Your Honor, this is a case not just about divorce, but about exploitation and betrayal. My client, Claire Harrington, was forced out of her home while pregnant with the defendant's child, left with no financial support due to a prenuptial agreement signed under dubious circumstances. We allege that Alexander Harrington had already embarked on an extramarital affair, thereby violating the marital contract in spirit and in law. We will demonstrate that the prenuptial agreement is unenforceable and that Mr. Harrington is obligated morally and legally to provide for both Miss S. Harrington and their unborn child. Then came Alexander's lead attorney, Mitchell Flanagan. His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. Your Honor, we acknowledge the unfortunate demise of this marriage. However, my client abided by the terms of a valid prenuptial agreement that Miss S. Harrington signed willingly and with legal counsel present. Furthermore, Mr. Harrington has never refused to support his child, but Miss S. Harrington has not afforded him the opportunity to do so privately. Instead, she seeks to extort my client by using the unborn child as leverage. Claire's cheeks flushed with indignation. She felt Rachel's calming hand on her forearm. Steady, her lawyer whispered. We knew they'd fling mud. One by one, witnesses were called. Rachel presented the hotel security guard who testified to Alexander's stays with Bianca. He described how Mr. Harrington was often seen entering a suite late at night with Miss Rossi, corroborating date stamps on credit card receipts. Alexander's attorney tried to discredit the guard, implying he was seeking a quick payday, but the guard's testimony was consistent and backed by digital logs. Bianca shifted uncomfortably in her seat, momentarily glancing at Alexander for reassurance. Next, they presented the former executive assistant, who confirmed scheduling personal meetings for Alexander that were actually rendezvous with Bianca. Emails introduced into evidence showed intimate language. The hush that fell over the courtroom was electric, each damning piece of evidence stacking up against Alexander. Alexander's team tried a different angle, implying that Claire had known about the affair and consented to an open marriage. They produced an email chain from months before the separation in which Claire wrote, I understand you have to travel and do what you must for the business. The defense twisted this to suggest she sanctioned all of Alexander's dealings. The cross-examination was harrowing. Claire's words were manipulated into unrecognizable insinuations. Her voice trembled as she explained that she was merely referring to legitimate business needs, never consenting to an extramarital affair. When it was Alexander's turn on the stand, he emanated an almost chilling composure. I never intended to abandon Claire, he claimed. We simply grew apart, and she refused to communicate her dissatisfaction until it was too late. As for Bianca, yes, we are in a relationship, but it began after Claire and I had reached an impasse. His eyes flickered over to Claire, a cold detachment in them. Rachel's cross-examination of Alexander was relentless. She drilled into the timelines, producing flight itineraries, phone call logs, and a stack of emails. Mr. Harrington, you claim your affair began after you and Miss S. Harrington were essentially separated, yet here is a booking confirmation for a Paris suite you shared with Miss Rossi on the night of your third wedding anniversary. Was your marriage already at an impasse then? Alexander's jaw tightened. That trip was for business. Miss Rossi happened to be there as an associate. We occasionally shared accommodations to cut costs. Laughter rippled through the courtroom at the absurdity of a billionaire cutting costs. Even Justice Martinez frowned, unimpressed. Rachel hammered further, forcing Alexander into contradictory statements. Claire observed him struggle to maintain his calm facade. It was a small moment of triumph, validating all her sleepless nights and anxious days. As the hearing stretched on, negotiations ramped up behind closed doors. Alexander's lawyers floated settlement offers designed to silence Claire quickly. They proposed a lump sum that might have tempted many. But Claire's determination was fueled by something far deeper than money alone. She wanted a formal apology, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and a secure future for her child. She rejected each offer, to the amazement of Alexander's legal team. During a recess, Alexander approached Claire in the corridor, catching her off guard. "You're making a spectacle of this," he hissed under his breath. "Do you really think you can beat me, Claire? You've refused every reasonable offer." "Reasonable?" Claire echoed, seething. "You threw me out with nothing, Alexander. You want to buy my silence so you can keep playing the victim? I won't let you." His eyes darkened. "You're pregnant with my child. I was willing to provide for you quietly, but if you insist on making this public, don't expect mercy when I win." She felt a rush of nausea and fury, but she held her ground. "I don't want your mercy. I want justice." He scoffed and turned on his heel, stalking away. Yet that encounter reinvigorated Claire's resolve. She knew she was doing the right thing. By the final days of the hearing, the tension was at a fever pitch. A forensic accountant hired by Rachel took the stand, explaining how Alexander siphoned marital assets to fund personal indulgences for Bianca, ranging from a diamond necklace to a lavish trip aboard a private yacht near Mykonos. The data was undeniable: receipts, wire transfers, and corporate account statements, all pointing to questionable activity. This revelation not only painted Alexander as an unfaithful spouse, but also hinted at financial impropriety that could concern the SEC if it involved misused funds from Harrington Global. Alexander's calm veneer began to crack. The press lapped it up, sensationalizing every twist. Rachel strategically leaked enough information to the media to ensure Alexander's once gilded reputation faced serious blowback. Corporate sponsors started voicing concern. Rumors swirled that Harrington Global's board of directors considered an internal review of Alexander's leadership. Then came the day of closing arguments. Rachel stood before Justice Martinez and delivered a speech that left the courtroom spellbound. "Marriage is a partnership," she intoned. "My client devoted herself to supporting her husband, professionally, emotionally, socially, only to be cast aside when she became pregnant with his child. Mr. Harrington's actions are not merely morally reprehensible, they also invalidate the good faith premise upon which the prenuptial agreement was signed. It is our stance that Miss S. Harrington deserves equitable restitution, not as a handout, but as her right after the betrayal and subterfuge orchestrated by Mr. Harrington." Flanagan, on the other hand, portrayed Claire as a cunning opportunist who saw her pregnancy as leverage. He insisted that she was perfectly aware of the prenuptial agreement's implications and had willfully entangled Alexander in a public scandal for personal gain. With closing arguments concluded, Justice Martinez declared she would review the evidence and issue her decision in a week's time. The tension was excruciating. Claire felt simultaneously hopeful and terrified. Outside the courthouse, reporters bombarded Claire with questions as she left, guarded by Rachel and Emily. She answered only one, her voice quivering with emotion. "I just want what's fair. I just want to protect my baby." In the swirl of camera flashes and shouted queries, Claire realized that no matter the verdict, she had found an unshakable sense of self. She was no longer just Alexander Harrington's wife or a helpless victim. She was a mother, a fighter and a woman reclaiming her story. The final judgment would either solidify her triumph or send her back into the shadows. But one thing was certain: she would never again allow herself to be silenced. A week later, Claire and Rachel sat side by side in the courtroom, tension rippling through every muscle. Alexander was present, arms folded, jaw clenched. Bianca was noticeably absent, possibly to avoid further negative publicity. Justice Martinez entered, the entire courtroom falling silent. She took a seat, cleared her throat, and began reading her verdict in a measured tone. Having reviewed the evidence presented, the testimonies of witnesses, and the arguments from both counsel, the court finds that the prenuptial agreement, while validly executed, was breached in spirit by Mr. Harrington's extramarital affair and misallocation of marital assets to fund said affair. Therefore, certain provisions limiting Miss S. Harrington's right to spousal support are nullified. Claire could scarcely breathe. Rachel gripped her hand tightly. The judge continued, "Additionally, Mr. Harrington's public and private conduct toward his pregnant wife and the undue pressure put upon Miss S. Harrington to vacate their marital home suggest a lack of equitable treatment. As such, Miss S. Harrington is awarded substantial spousal support and child support, subject to periodic review by this court. Mr. Harrington is also responsible for covering all legal fees incurred by Miss S. Harrington in this litigation." Alexander's face drained of color, his lawyer's shoulders sagging in defeat. A hush fell over the room, then an excited murmur erupted. Claire felt a hot rush of tears sting her eyes, relief, vindication, and a swell of gratitude toward Rachel and everyone who had stood by her side. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement. Rachel, beaming triumph, gave a succinct press conference. Today's verdict reaffirms that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is above their responsibilities, not only legal, but moral. We are satisfied that justice has been served. Claire, for her part, made a brief statement. "I'm relieved this ordeal is over. I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. Now I intend to focus on the health and happiness of my child. Thank you." Alexander exited through a side door, ignoring the barrage of questions about his affair, his finances, and his battered reputation. In the days that followed, tabloids and business journals alike reported on Alexander Harrington's downfall. His board of directors demanded answers about the misused funds. Bianca Rossi suddenly distanced herself, releasing a hollow statement that she never intended to cause harm. Social media platforms buzzed with memes mocking Alexander's hypocrisy, while also praising Claire for her courage. It was a public humiliation for the once untouchable billionaire. Claire moved into a comfortable apartment near Central Park, ironically just a few blocks from her old penthouse. But this time, it felt like her own. She used part of her settlement to invest in her interior design business, determined to forge a stable future for herself and her upcoming child. Emily helped decorate the new nursery, painting the walls a soft lavender and setting up a crib with fairy lights hanging overhead. Late one afternoon, Rachel stopped by with a bouquet of sunflowers, a warm smile gracing her face. "How are you feeling?" she asked, glancing pointedly at Claire's growing baby bump. "Tired, but hopeful," Claire said. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done." Rachel shook her head. "You did the hardest part, Claire, facing him in court, standing up for yourself. I just helped you along the way." A gentle kick in Claire's belly reminded her of the new life that had been her anchor throughout the turmoil. She placed a hand there, feeling an overwhelming surge of love. "I can't wait to meet this little one," she said, smiling through tears. "It's funny, everything I feared is behind me now. I used to think Alexander was my whole world. Now I see just how strong I am without him." Rachel nodded. "That's the best victory of all." And so ends the tumultuous saga of a billionaire's betrayal and a woman's unwavering fight for justice. Claire's story reminds us that no matter how powerful an adversary appears, courage and truth can level any battlefield. Betrayed and discarded, she found the resolve to challenge a man who believed his wealth made him untouchable. With the help of a brilliant lawyer and true friends, Claire claimed more than just a financial settlement. She reclaimed her life and her dignity. If you found inspiration, hope, or even just riveting drama in Claire's journey, we invite you to be part of this community. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so more people can witness tales of triumph over adversity. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful real-life and fictional stories that stir the heart and uplift the soul. Stay tuned for more incredible stories, and remember, resilience and justice belong to everyone.